Here is the chapter to gap your two studies. When the Almighty laid down the second commandment, forbidding the bowing down to any carved image or likeness, he wasn't merely giving a moral guideline. He was establishing a battlefield line between the living Creator and the dead, deceptive constructs of men and devils. To understand how the physical idols of the ancient world connect to the invisible traps of the modern day, we must look at a moment where God decided to set a public, terrifying example out of the most prominent false god of Israel's fiercest enemies, the Philistines. The story centers on Dagon, a massive idol depicted as a grotesque fusion of a man and a fish, representing fertility, abundance, and the power of the sea. The Philistines thought they had captured the ultimate trophy when they took the Ark of the Covenant in battle, placing it inside Dagon's temple in Ashdod, as if to declare their fish god victorious over Jehovah. But the living God does not share his glory, nor does he tolerate being treated as a secondary trophy. When the citizens of Ashdod woke up the next morning, they walked into their temple, only to find their towering, heavy idol of Dagon flat on its face, prostrated on the ground before the Ark of the Covenant. It was a humiliating visual sermon. Hoping it was a freak accident, they hoisted the heavy stone or wooden idol back onto its pedestal. Yet, the very next morning, God set the ultimate example. Not only was Dagon fallen again, but this time his head and both of his hands were severed, lying broken on the threshold, leaving nothing but a helpless, empty stump. By breaking the hands, God showed Dagon had no power to act. By breaking the head, he showed Dagon had no wisdom or authority. It proved that behind the imposing, golden facade of any physical idol is a hollow, powerless construct that shatters before the presence of the true God. This dramatic, historical shattering provides the perfect bridge to our next urgent truth. While God explicitly demonstrated that the physical stone, wood, and silver of these idols are nothing but breakable dust, the deceptive spiritual architecture behind them did not vanish when the temples crumbled. The physical images of Dagon, Asherah, and Baal were merely the ancient, localized clothing worn by rebellious, fallen spiritual entities designed to siphon worship away from the Creator. If these ancient gods were real spiritual forces, where are they now? They didn't pack up and leave the earth. They simply changed their wardrobe. The same demonic entities that once demanded physical bowing before a fish hybrid or a carved wooden pole are still actively operating in our world today, having shed their ancient, primitive names to adopt sophisticated, modern titles that catch us off guard if we are not watching the threshold. They never truly died, they just underwent a corporate rebranding. When the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as its state religion, it didn't execute an Ebed Tiabedun, total destruction of paganism. Instead, it engaged in syncretism, absorbing the old gods, changing their labels, and keeping the exact same physical infrastructure alive and well. The gods of yesterday are hiding in plain sight today, completely integrated into modern religious and secular culture. 1. The Asherah poles and goddess worship. The Asherah was an ancient Canaanite fertility goddess associated with trees, groves, life, and protection. Her physical representations, the Asherah poles, were carved wooden structures or sacred trees erected beside altars. Where she is today, religious form. She was absorbed directly into the cult of the Virgin Mary as the Queen of Heaven, a title originally belonging to the pagan goddess Ishtar Asherah, as condemned in Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 18. The emotional and spiritual function is identical. A maternal, comforting female intercessor who provides protection, fertility, and grace. Where she is today, secular form. The ritual of the maypole, where people dance around a decorated wooden pole covered in ribbons to celebrate spring, fertility, and new life, is a direct, unbroken survival of the ancient Asherah pole ritual. Even the Christmas tree brought into the home and decorated as a sacred winter icon mirrors the exact ancient practice condemned in Jeremiah 10 of cutting a tree from the forest, decking it with silver and gold and fastening it so it won't move. 2. The Matzabah, standing pillars and obelisks. The ancient nations erected matzabat, sacred standing stones or pillars, to represent male deities, particularly Baal, symbolizing strength, solar power, and erect monumental authority. In Egypt and Babylon, these took the form of the obelisk, a four-sided sun pillar dedicated to the sun god. Where they are today, the ultimate, undeniable proof of this survival stands right in the center of St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. Rome did not destroy the ancient Egyptian obelisk dedicated to the sun god. They brought it to the heart of their sanctuary wall, erected it in a massive solar wheel design on the pavement, and simply slapped a cross on top of it. In everyday architecture, you see these ancient pillars of Baal and sun god obelisks in almost every major center of worldly power, from the Washington Monument to the towering steeples on top of local churches. The structure remains exactly the same, only the explanation has changed. 3. The Pantheon of the Saints. In ancient Rome and Greece, if you had a specific problem, you went to a specific lesser god. If you were a sailor, you prayed to Poseidon. If you wanted protection for your crops, you prayed to Demeter. If you were traveling, you invoked Hermes. Where they are today. The Roman religious system simply swapped the word God for saint. Sailors were told to pray to Saint Christopher or Saint Elmo. Farmers were told to pray to Saint Isidore. Travelers invoked Saint Anthony to find lost items. The mechanism is completely pagan, assigning spiritual authority over specific human affairs to deceased human beings, and creating small statues, pestle, of them to carry in your car, wear on your neck, or place in your garden. 4. The high altars and sacrificial pomp. The Canaanites and Romans relied heavily on a specialized priesthood, magnificent robes, burning incense to clear the air for the spirits, and a physical high altar, where a sacrifice had to be constantly repeated or reenacted to appease the deity. Where it is today. Walk into any traditional Roman cathedral. You will see the high altar front and center. You will see the priest in elaborate vestments burning incense, and you will see the monstrance, a sunburst-shaped gold vessel used to display the bread, which they believe is literally transformed back into the flesh of Christ to be sacrificed over and over again. It is the exact structural pattern of the ancient pagan temples, completely ignoring that Jesus offered one sacrifice for sins forever and sat down. Hebrews chapter 10 verse 12. The gods of yesterday didn't pack up and leave. They just waited for a compromised system to stop destroying them, give them a coat of Christian paint, and invite them right into the sanctuary. The walls and pillars are still standing, they just have different names on the plaques.